Luke, I am your father. I am your father. You know what's funny is the voice of Darth Vader, he had a stuttering problem. So
is our president.
Hey! You don't have to be good at all. Anybody can start a podcast.
True. Anybody can do it.
Anybody can do it, and anybody can critique it, right?
That's just the nature of social media these days, right? Everybody's an expert. Everybody is a critic.
Yeah. And everyone can do it better. Everybody.
It
doesn't matter, Luke. We are a year into this podcast. We've been doing it, and we've moved into the top 1% of podcasts. We've been having fun, heard some weird stuff.
We're 1%ers, Nate. It means that we should probably get patched in now to the podcast gang.
Exactly. Where do you get your jacket? Where do you get your green jacket?
Get our colors, man.
You can meet at the ninth hole at midnight? How's
the old 19th at 9? Is it from Happy Gilmore?
Yeah.
Well, the ninth at 9, ninth hole at 9, and they turn the sprinklers on.
Yeah.
I'll see you there.
But the way it works on Blurry Creatures is you meet out the giant mound at 9. Sasquatch comes and just takes you away.
Yeah, as long as you don't get shot on the way out there.
Did you see that bone I posted on Instagram today? That giant femur that was found on a giant mound?
No, I didn't see it. You posted a giant bone on Instagram. I thought it was going a different direction. I'm proud of you. It's a family show.
You can't shake out the dude and the man. You know what I mean?
I don't know what that means, but it's good though.
The history of our Earth is so different from what we can imagine.
The Smithsonian, that if they found out about a large skeleton somewhere, was to go get it.
I'm going to assume at least one person is right, because if one person's right, it busts the paradigm.
It all goes back to the fallen cherub. And the problem with the modern day church, they have a very truncated view of the supernatural.
This backdrop that's just pregnant with all kinds of meaning associated with this Mount Hermon event.
Welcome to Blurry Creatures.
And this guy defects from the kingdom. That's a big deal.
So welcome, Ark from Destiny Lab. You're man of many trades. We did a little research on you. We used to design costumes or creature costumes, and you have a hip hop group called Destiny Lab. That's your main thing, where you write about all the subjects that we talk about on our show, which is pretty cool. And you sent us this message, and I have to read it because this is just there's no better way to introduce the show, Luke. We could talk about anything you want. You said there's a clear connection between original sin in the garden and so many deceptions. We could talk about fallen angels and the Nephilim, evolution, eugenics, transhumanism, the occult, sleep paralysis, DMT elves, alien abductions, cryptic creatures, Ouija boards, channeling, CERN, quantum computers, the hive mind, singularity, the mark of the beast, and the Antichrist. I'm like, if you send that message like that to us, we're gonna have you on the show.
This starts giving Nate the juice. Nate starts getting the juice, and he's like, we'll just talk about all of it.
So welcome to the show, Ark from Destiny Lab. Did we get any of that right, or did we butcher some of that?
That sounds about right.
Okay.
It all connects. So that and more, believe it or not.
So tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you get started talking about these things, writing music about these things? Sounds like you've been in this game a lot longer than we have. Love to hear your story.
Yeah. I'm pretty old for doing hip hop. I turned 50 years old this year. So I'm in your genre of the 80s guy. Me and Genetics, who's my partner with Destiny Lab, we're both 80s guys. So
would you say would you say you put the hip in hip hop? Heyo.
I was making hip hop when it was still just called rap.
Hey, let's go.
Yeah. But what made you want to rap about the Nephilim and the giants and the biblical, the weird stuff in the Bible, basically?
Well, it started, I grew up in a Christian home. Let me lay the foundation here so it makes a little sense. So I grew up in a Christian home, and so from very early age, I was a believer, but I was always really into the weird and bizarre, off the wall kind of stuff, into aliens, creatures, Bigfoot. All the stories I wrote about at school were all about, these types of things. So all the books I read were about paranormal and mysteries and all these kinds of things. And then when I was about 15, I decided I want to be a special effects makeup artist. And I just committed myself to making masks and prosthetics and all that type of stuff. So I had a full portfolio of things by the time I got to high school. And another thing that happened to me, just to kind of lay a foundation, is when I was 12 years old, my brother and I found a satanic ritual site within about a half mile from my house. And there was like 3 dead cats that had been gutted. There's an upside down altar with a dead cat duct taped to it. There was all this kind of ritual writing, candles, all this stuff. And it was at this place where people would kind of hang out and drink and do that type of thing in a kind of this entrance to a canal. And it just freaked me out because I was like, and we called the sheriff, and he came out and gathered all this stuff. And he said, "Oh yeah, you'd be surprised. We gather this stuff on a pretty regular basis."
Man.
And it just freaked me out because I was like, wow, this is real. There's people that are evil out there, even in my small town, that are doing this kind of stuff. And it just really kind of lit a fire under me to kind of expose that kind of stuff. And just kind of like, from a Christian point of view, I always kind of like wanted to, and my mom always told me, you were named David after King David, and you should go to battle, head on against this kind of stuff. And so I always kind of felt like this, that I had a calling, so to speak. And when I got out of high school, I moved to Los Angeles, straight to LA, to work as a special effects makeup artist, because that's what I wanted to do. And the first movie I ever worked on was The Lawnmower Man. And so I don't know if you guys have seen this movie, but it's all about merging mankind with machine, using AI technology to download, intelligence into a guy and makes him into like a god man, basically, through technology. This also introduced me to transhumanism. I got deep into studying all these kinds of things, and also aliens. Aliens was like my foundation, because this is what I was creating. I was sculpting aliens, making them. And I got kind of deceived for a while there. Even though I was a believer, I started thinking, well, maybe these things are, and angels in disguise, and there's got to be some sort of connection here. And this whole time I was also big into hip hop, and I was making hip hop with friends, just for fun. And then I started connecting the dots between I started investigating evolution deception, and how that kind of tied into the idea that mankind was evolving, getting bigger and better, and moving toward this, new eon of humanity. And this is the same message I was hearing from these alien channelers, because I was big into reading all these things about alien abductions, people who are contacting aliens. And then I also got into taking hallucinogenics, because like I said, I was on my prodigal son journey there a little bit. When I went to LA, from a small town to LA, it was quite a change in my my everyday living. So I kind of went on a prodigal son journey there, and I started going to Grateful Dead concerts, kind of exploring this whole new age kind of ideas that I saw there. But I felt the whole time that I was doing it kind of like, okay, I'm an undercover Christian going in, and this is how I'm going to like investigate this stuff or whatever. And in the end, I gathered actually a lot of really interesting information from that firsthand experience, seeing people doing these things, talking about these same types of things. And eventually I started putting all these pieces of the puzzle together, and I thought, man, there's got to be a way to expose this stuff. And around the same time, I found out there was this genre called Christian hip hop, which I didn't even know existed. And I started listening to a lot of Christian hip hop, and I was thinking, man, nobody's really talking about any of these kinds
Would you
of things.
say it was a new thing?
No, Christian hip hop been around for a while, but I would say it was at that point definitely starting to take off. And there were some pretty interesting artists like Shadow of the Locust, Dirt. He was a really good artist I was listening to, and some different people like that. But nobody's really digging into the Nephilim or evolution or any of these kind of things that I had been studying. And I just felt like a calling. I felt like almost I went to see, I don't know if you know who Kent Hovind is, but he does creation seminars. And I went to see him live, and he said at the end of the seminar, what can you use your talents for to expose, these types of deception? I thought, man, hip hop would be perfect for exposing evolution, all these, connections. And so I just felt like convicted to do this. And I never, like I said, I never had set out to do, I don't like necessarily being the center of attention or being on stage, that type of thing. I just made rap for fun with friends. But I felt convicted that, hey, if nobody else is doing this, I'm going to start doing this. And so in 2004, I officially formed the group Destiny Lab, although I was talking about these kinds of things in the late 90s with some friends and some other raps I was making. But in 2004, I officially formed the group because I felt this is destiny. All these things have kind of pieces of the puzzle have come together to bring me to this conclusion. And I feel like that's why we're going to do this. And so I called Genetics, who's a guy I'd made music with for several years, and told him all about this stuff. And we just really went off and started making the music. And just, at first I thought I could be signed by some Christian label or whatever. Now I look back and think how crazy I was to think that was never going to happen with the things we talk about. So we eventually went, I went just indie and independently released all our music in CDs and whatnot. And we currently have four albums and a fifth album that's just collaborations and remixes available now. So yeah, it's been a long journey. And so one of the things, that's how I got into making music. So I'll stop there and before I keep rambling.
Well, as a Hollywood effects, costume effect, we got to ask you, what are your thoughts on Bigfoot? Because that's what we ask everybody. And Patterson-Gimlin film. Let's talk about that for a little bit, right, Luke?
That actually got some inside information on that.
Oh, that's what I want to hear, the insider stuff. Then we got to dive into Hollywood a little bit, and then, I mean, you kind of perked my interest with the aliens. But let's start with Nate said. This is the way we baptize people into blurry creatures. We ask them, what are your thoughts on Bigfoot?
Well, I think it's a mixture of both. I think it's definitely possible that there could be unknown creatures out there. I know there's a lot of reputable people who have had experiences, and if you're not there, who's to say? But I also think it's quite fascinating when you look into some of these people and you look into their background of their interests and the things they were into before they got into or while they're into Bigfoot. You'll find that it's very similar to the alien experiences. You'll find a lot of these people are all into kind of new age, occult kind of ideas, Ouija boards, ghost hunting, seances, just kind of this off the wall things that are doorways for what I believe are demonic entities. And I think the demonic realm can wear many disguises depending on your belief system and where you come from. And I think they've changed these disguises throughout time. This is how we can recognize them if we look back in history, as you look at the universalities of certain things and how to connect the dots there. But I think it's a mixture of multiple things, possibly possibly real things, possibly interdimensional types of things, and possibly almost like ghost entities or things that can, come and, appear or appear and disappear type of thing and change their look depending on what you believe or want them to look like, your intent.
And that's not uncommon. I mean, I think that we cover a lot of the experiences here, Nate, from Dr. Jeff Meldrum to to a firsthand accounts where we have people saying that Bigfoot disappears, and they shot at Bigfoot and he was gone, and then he was there, and then he wasn't there. And I don't mean to assume his gender. I'm just saying the Bigfoot itself, Mr. Bigfoot or Mrs. Bigfoot, was there and then gone. And so there's all and I think I think you're onto something that we've been on to now 50 episodes in, is that there's just a lot of weird stuff that happens around Bigfoot. And
it's not just Bigfoot. It's, it's the Mothman. It's, even Loch Ness Monster, where Aleister Crowley was doing rituals. There's a lot of weird connections that if you start digging into it, you start exposing these things and make you go, why are they into this too?
Right.
Yeah.
So what about Patty? You kind of tell us about Patty.
Here's the third possibility is hoaxes. So being a special effects artist and working with different people, I'm really good friends with a guy named Ed Edmonds, and he owns a company called Distortions Unlimited, which is the largest Halloween manufacturer of items in the United States. And he's also a huge Christian and a huge believer and a huge fan of Destiny Lab, by the way. Oh. And
checking all the boxes.
There you go. And I've worked with him. I've sculpted a mask for his company a couple years ago, and met with him and his wife and had some really good discussions. And he has inside connections basically with a guy, the Morris Costume Company is supposedly the people that created the Patterson Gimli costume. And there was an actual, I don't know if you've seen this, but they actually showed this on YouTube. They brought forth the guy who actually wore the costume, showed it side by side of him walking, and he looks identical to the walk of the original footage. And they all basically admitted that this was a hoax that they kind of put together. So it's kind of been exposed, to be honest. But I just don't think a lot of people know about it or have seen those videos and documentary.
Oh, it's very controversial because Jeff Meldrum has the casts of that day, and so I think some of those guys are. My take is some of those guys are being paid to say that. They're being paid to say there's a suit, but that's my take.
I guess that's a possibility. I mean, that is a possibility.
Yeah.
I mean, somebody could. But have you seen the guy walk that looks literally exactly like the walk?
I've seen all. Guy now. Well, people always tell us it's fake in a suit, so I've looked into it quite extensively. The weird thing is that it's a female, and there's like muscle movement, and
I don't think they ever deal with that. I don't think they ever ask that question. That's one of my main questions I always had. Like, what about the boobs?
Yeah, right.
Exactly.
I mean, that's
somebody.
Good point.
It's controversial. I think there's a lot of guys. I mean, Jeff Meldrum would go into detail with you about
Nate. Actually, Nate's a believer. I just got to be honest. Nate's towing the line here, but he thinks it's real. Nate, I know you do.
Well, it's one of those things. Like I spent more time on Bigfoot than anything else in this space, so that was just the thing that I obsessed about. So I watched all the. There's probably like 6 or 7 documentaries just on that film. So
and Ark, I'm not. We're tracking with you though. I mean, like there's a possibility people are saying that, and it. I don't know. Until someone comes out and tells us, or it's just like the whole thing. Until the aliens land on the White House lawn, where people are gonna end up on one side or the other of this argument.
It's difficult.
Yeah, I guess I'm just going from my friend and kind of believe because he knows these guys and so I guess I just took it for what it was, but they're like anything,
it's controversial.
2 different sides of the story.
Yeah. I mean, we've heard,
that's for sure, and it's like the alien thing. People think all kinds of things, and it's probably a mixture of both.
Yeah. I mean, Mike Heiser came on and he said there was a podcast that they did like a 4-hour breakdown of this and interviewed everybody, and it's like you could do a whole podcast just on that film. It sounds like from all the things we've heard. But we can move on to some other things because, obviously the list of things you said you wanted to talk about were pretty expansive. So you're in LA and you're starting to kind of have your prodigal son moment you were saying. I want to hear a little bit about just kind of what brought you back to realizing that, life isn't, it sounds like you had a moment where you just felt like life wasn't just about having a good time.
Yeah.
There's a lot more.
Sounds like a come to Jesus moment, right? Not ironically.
Within the first year and a half that I was here, I had 2 cars stolen. I had my apartment broken into when I went home for Christmas. I was paying $1,000 a month for literally a studio apartment in not the best of neighborhoods. And I just felt like, man, is this where I want to raise a family? Is this where I want to do I really want to get deep into this before I can get out, And I just felt like, from my experiences of work, I worked on 2 or 3 different movies and in some studios, and just felt like, it's fun, but it's not all it's cracked up to be. And I felt like I could, start my own mask company. And so that's what I decided. I eventually got out of LA. I moved up to Portland when it was still slightly just weird in a fun way, instead of weird in a communist socialist way.
Yeah.
But and I moved up there, and I started selling my work at the Saturday Marketplace in Portland, which is like kind of a famous marketplace downtown there.
That's a great place to sell weird stuff.
Yeah, lots of weird stuff. So that's where I sold my work for several years, and then I did mask making classes. That's about it for many, many years. But yeah, that's how I got out of LA. But the way I got out of this deception was, through investigating the connections. I started investigating the alien connection, seeing what these alien abductees were saying. Then I was investigating kind of occult type of things and kind of new age kind of things. And like I said, I was going to these new age kind of gatherings, Grateful Dead concerts, and you'd see people talking about all these similar kinds of ideas of like, you can be enlightened, man. We're all divine. We're all gods. All you need to do is look within, yoga, all these kinds of things. And I began to recognize that sounds familiar. I remember back in Sunday school when they said, how did the serpent deceive Eve? And she said, the serpent came to Eve and he said, if you eat of this fruit, ye shall be as gods. And this to me, was an epiphany, because it made everything, all these things start connect. I thought, that's what I've been hearing from all these people. And now that I've connected the dots, it's incredible how many things are connected there. I mean, if you look at every single mystery school out there, whether it's the Freemasons, the Rosicrucians, the Kabbalists, the Jesuits, the Gnostics, all these people in one form or another believe the original sin, which is Luciferianism. If you ask a Luciferianist, what do you believe? They don't believe in Satan or God. They believe that they are their own gods. And they'll tell you that. That's what they believe. That's the foundation of their belief system is they are their own gods. And so this idea has been repackaged throughout time over and over and over and over again. And I began to recognize this, and I thought, oh my gosh, how can people not see this? Trying to connect the dots as well through how evolution ties into this. If you go back to the people who invented evolution, they were really into weird stuff. The Huxley family, who was the family that was part of the whole eugenics movement in the early turn of the century. I mean, they're the ones that eventually coined the term transhumanism to make eugenics a palatable thing, because it became, once Hitler came along, then eugenics kind of fell out of fashion because he was basically doing the same thing. And so you'll find that all these people throughout time, and then if you go to look at like these movements nowadays, whether it's the Zeitgeist movement, The Secret, What the Bleep Do We Know, The Burning Man, the Sacred Chapel of Mirrors, Sirius, Unacknowledged, the Spirit Molecule, all these things are teaching that exact thing, that you are a god. You can be divine. All you need to do is look within. You don't need a savior. You don't need someone, you're not a sinner. You need to, forget all that and start accepting your divinity. And that's really what I believe is what we're seeing. And that's what I try to expose fundamentally in my music, is this deception, this original sin deception, because I feel like this is one of the things that at least for me, made all these things make sense. And the digger you deep, the more information, or the deeper you dig, the more information that connects. So it's pretty incredible how many things. And I basically have all kinds of studies and information that I've gone through exposing that exact deception, whether it's all these different occult documentaries and people that groups get together. If you go on and watch or investigate all these cults throughout time, and look at the documentaries made of them. And there's a few dozen of them, like the Wild Wild Country and Holy Hell, and the Commune, the Source, Prophet's Prey, Life and Death of the People's Temple, The Family, Children of God. All these documentaries tell this exact story. These people brought in, convinced that they're divine, convinced that you're following some cult leader who can act as a false messiah and be the gateway to, making you divine, either through some sort of secret knowledge, rituals, or some sort of works, and that's the difference between Christianity and all these deceptions. Is Christianity is based in grace, and it's the one thing that is set apart from all these deceptions throughout time. It's the one thing that is not based in works and looking within and becoming divine. And I think these are the demonic, this is the demonic agenda that is trying to move us toward the idea of doing this with technology now. They've tried through the occult throughout time, secret societies. Now the secrets have been exposed. The cat's out of the bag with the internet. And I think it's now moved to a new genre where they're like, okay, now we're going to shove it right in your face. We're going to, not even try to hide it, because, that'll make people just scared and not want to investigate.
So we've, Luke and I have been having some private conversations about some of these things, and it seems it's building to a crescendo. Like, it's just getting more and more obvious that there is a global cabal controlling everything. But then, we've had some people send us links and stuff to videos of, and there's this whole other spiritual side. And the hard part about doing a show like this, Ark, is that, you don't know. There's just a lot of, in this space, you don't know, like, okay, what is this person's core belief? Are they going to come on and talk about spirituality? So sometimes Luke and I have to have these conversations of, like, we don't just want to bring anybody on our show, because we do believe in the biblical narrative. And we do believe there's a lot of deception out there, but that we've seen there are some people into this spiritual ascension that's coming, right? Mm-hmm. Do you believe there's a sort of a covert group of that Satan is using, and then there's going to be this spiritual thing that's going to come in and solve that problem? Because it seems like we're being set up for some great solution that's coming, but it's going to be a deception.
Yeah. Well, that's always been kind of the promise, is this omega point, this event horizon or place where man turns to the golden age, and we're told that in the ancient times, that's what there was, this golden age, and we've lost it. And then we just got to get back to that. And I think this just, in a way, this is true, because it goes back to the garden. God created us to be, in this perfect sense and have communion with him, just like Adam and Eve. And this is the story to all those people who say, why didn't God just, show himself or make himself known? And he's like, he did that back in the beginning with Garden of Eden. And, it's kind of interesting. I can't remember who you were talking with. I think it was Tim Alberino, where you're talking about the reason they got kicked out of the garden. And, and I think there's a little bit more to that story than what you guys went into there, because, when they ate of the fruit, what is the first thing that God, and I have this note, let me pull this up just real quick, just so I know exactly what I'm saying. The first thing that God did after they ate of the fruit and kind of chewed them out, he drove, in Genesis 3:24 says, he drove out the man, and at the east of the Garden of Eden, he placed a cherubim and a flaming sword that turned every way to guard the way to the tree of life. Why was he wanting to guard the way to the tree of life? What, you ever thought about that?
Yeah,
we have thought about this, actually.
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe I missed that episode.
Well, yeah, supposedly that's when we lost, death was upon us, because, I think Tim went into detail, Luke, about being intrinsic, extrinsic immortality.
Yeah, I think the gist of it, Nate, was that Tim hypothesizes that the immortality, of the angelic realm and what we were supposed to have before the fall, before death came in, was by eating of the tree. It's kind of like the fountain of youth, I guess, idea. And so once we had fallen and done the one thing we were told not to do, that we were now separate from from the ability, to essentially be immortal and to walk with God, as Adam walked with God in the garden. And so it's interesting. Tim, I think, also hypothesizes that Eden is really heaven, and then when Jesus is on the cross and talking about paradise, and that this is the place that's been prepared, and ultimately will be restored. We will be as humanity be restored to the garden if we believe on Christ. So that stuff's fascinating. I hadn't really thought about it in that sense.
Yeah.
And I was actually listening to Tim Mackey, if you guys know that from the Bible Project, talk about some of this stuff, which I thought was also fascinating. That Satan and Lucifer and that God was the garden. That was his place, and outside the garden was the wilderness, and that was the dominion and the domain of Satan. And so when we were thrown out of the garden, we were tossed down to a place where it was more or less where the evil was, and that, of course, is outside of the presence of God. There's a ton of metaphors there, and then you can jump into all this Eden stuff, right? Like the idea that the rivers flowed down from Eden and watered the entire land, and so maybe Eden was on top of a mountain. We've talked about the celestial waters on top of Mount Hermon, and you can rabbit hole like crazy on that. But But go ahead. I mean, one of the things, it's fascinating that there is a flaming sword and a guard for this place, and possibly it's not just us, but also that rebellion in heaven, right? That's now not allowed.
Yeah.
If you look at Psalm 82 and the judgment of God on the council, divine council, you're gonna die like men, which means there's no longer access, right? So.
Yep. Yeah, exactly right. I totally agree. I think, it's the whole story in a nutshell in a way, because he's telling us, he's warning us, he's giving this divine warning of like, this is what Satan wants to do. He wants you to become trapped in your sin, and then he wants you trapped there forever, because that's what Satan ultimately wanted to do. I think is keep them in that garden, but keep them in a sin state, or basically out of the garden, with still access to the tree of life, so they could, through their own works or their own knowledge, then, become divine. And this is what throughout time, through Nimrod, through, all of the secret societies, through up to transhumanism is what I believe we're seeing, is this exact same storyline. And I believe the reason is because these people talk with these entities. And I have a little bit of disagreement with, I know Tim believes these are more physical. I lean more toward the interdimensional realm. I used to believe it was more physical, but through time and just kind of trying to connect all the dots and seeing how some things are universal and some things aren't, and how many like little twists and manipulations there are depending on what someone believes on how these things sort of show themselves. And part of my belief of why I lean more to the interdimensional is also my study into the DMT ayahuasca realm, because I think this is very similar, as well as the sleep paralysis connection. If you study the sleep paralysis connection, people like Joe Jordan, who's collected over 500 testimonies of people that have suffered from sleep paralysis for sometimes decades at a time, almost every one of these people, before they started suffering from this thing, had some sort of connection with playing with some sort of doorway that opened themselves up to this. Not everybody, but I would say almost everybody had some sort of connection, either in the occult, playing with Ouija boards at some time in their life, some sort of doorway that they gave permission for these entities to work. And I think Satan doesn't really create anything. He just twists and manipulates all the things of God and inverts them to glorify himself and glorify mankind. And I think his whole goal, going back to the beginning with the fallen angels, where he started interbreeding with the daughters of men, the goal here was basically to pollute the bloodline of the Messiah. He knew that, these fallen angels knew the word of God. They knew no prophecy. They know that the Messiah was supposed to come from a pure bloodline of Adam. And if you go back and and that's why all these endless genealogies are in the Bible, because there's actually a real important meaning to that, because it's telling you that God or Jesus did come from the direct genealogy of Adam. And I think at one point it got down to where there was actually only like one person left it passed on that bloodline. And we did a podcast. I do a podcast as well with my brother called Digging for the Truth with Ark and Neo. And we've talked about a lot of these different subjects in depth. And we've gone over that once before. And it's really weird. And so going back to Joe Jordan, what he has found is once people recognize these things as demonic, rebuke them and take authority in Jesus' name, that these things leave and they don't return. And not, like I said, it isn't 100% of the time across the board, but it's enough to where he has hundreds and hundreds of testimonies of this. And I'm not aware that there's any website out there of testimonies of Buddha that saves people from sleep paralysis and alien abductions, or Muhammad or Krishna or any other name. It's possible that it's happening, but I'm not aware of anybody who's collected those testimonies or seen that. So
do you think that they're being taken though? They're taken in spaceships?
I don't. I think it's possible, but I have never seen any evidence for that of concrete, like somebody like, hey, I'm getting probed. Let me grab a probe, shove it in my pocket. Let me get my camera phone. I mean, with the amount of cameras there are out there nowadays, the people that are being abducted sometimes go through this for decades, right? So with the amount of how cheap it is to set up a night vision camera in every portion of your house, I would think someone at this point would catch somebody floating through a window or something and not have it be kind of cheesy hoaxy. So,
well, I mean,
I lean toward no.
Well, it's crazy because you can't even capture a photo of Bigfoot because they seem to have some sort of paranormal ability to stop trail cams and do all sorts of things. So if Bigfoot can keep himself from being recorded, how much more could these entities be? The weird thing is, Ark, though, is how come people are describing the same thing happening? I mean, what's the point of the deception of being the story of that they're being taken up in spaceships? All of these people are saying sort of the same thing. That was Tim's argument, is that thousands of people around the world, and then people do see UFOs over people's houses. So I mean, it's difficult.
I'll tell you what. I think if you go back through time, if you look at the earliest accounts of alien encounters, abduction scenarios, what were these aliens telling people? They were saying, we're from Venus, we're from Mars, we're from the moon. They used to tell that they're Quakers on the moon that lived on the moon, and Zeta, in these areas within our own understanding at that given time. And then as time changed and we decided, the big universe is much bigger, and evolution is true. Once evolution was introduced and people thought where there's water, there's life, all of a sudden these entities are from Zeta Reticuli and, the Pleiadians and from all these distant far galaxies. So I think that their story has changed throughout time. And I think it changes depending on someone's belief system as well. You go to people that live in like Great Britain or England, they'll describe more Nordic beings a lot of times. They actually even speak with an English accent, and, and people that are more into, the alien gray, American kind of things, you see the alien grays. And I'm not saying it's absolute. I don't know. There's no way for me to be able to tell, but from my perspective of studying all these different things and seeing the subtle differences, they're the same, but they're subtly different. People describe these entities and they're just always not always wearing the same costume. They're not always have the same insignia, but sometimes they do. Sometimes they do have like an occult type of snake pattern or some sort of a Masonic almost pattern. And so, it's almost like it's something that is changing as someone is, this whole idea of parallel universes, and that what we believe is created at that exact instance that we're seeing things. If that's true, if there is literally reality being created as we're experiencing it, then these things could be morphing and changing depending on, someone's beliefs and how they're interpreting this. And if you go into like I said, the DMT and ayahuasca realms, it's really weird because it's almost even more realistic, the stories that they tell, than any alien abduction experience you're going to ever see. These people start interacting with these entities before they even take ayahuasca many times. there's been many people describe once they bought their ticket to Peru just to go and set their intent to go take ayahuasca, all of a sudden that night they started being visited by these beings in their dreams and preparing them before they ever even go there, and then when they go and take the actual ayahuasca, they interact with that same being that they were having dreams with, and they call them by name, and they say, "Oh, I was talking to your friend who was here a few months ago, and he had this so it's literally like they're going to another realm and literally interacting with real entities of some sort. But are they really? Because you can take camera and the person's right there. They don't actually leave. But the things that they describe, they would say, I mean, it convinces atheists to become believers in some sort of, supernatural all the time. And so it's something so powerful, and I have no personal experience in it, but it's something so powerful that it convinces these people that this is an actual realm of some sort, not just somebody high on drugs and all in their head. So I don't know, man, it's really strange. And all these things, I think there are connections, because the reason I believe there's connections is because they tell the same story. When you interact with the DMT elves, when you interact with a seance, when you have a Ouija board, when you do a channeling experience, they tell you the same thing. They have an anti-Christian message, first of all. They want to tell you that the Bible is not real, that Jesus was misunderstood, that he's just a new age avatar, and that we can all just become divine just like Jesus. All we need to look within. I mean, the same old lie. And it's been repackaged through, like you're talking about this omega point, or people trying to push toward this idea. This is the age of Aquarius. Let's get rid of the fish god. Let's usher in the water bearer. Everybody do the water bucket challenge, so we can pour water on your head and do this a big occult ritual without people knowing it. This is trying to usher in the age of Aquarius, in my mind. This is, it's just like the Black Lives Matter movement. Say their name, say their name. These people believe in African voodoo, which talks about repeating the names of the dead, which makes them rise up and indwell the people that are there. They give out libations before pouring out, liquid water as libations to the dead before every meeting and every get together. These people are a spiritually charged group, and everything around us, I believe, is being spiritually charged in the same way. It all goes back to, we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against these principalities. And that's what these principalities are, all these things we're discussing, what they are, how they do these things. I think they're all the same things, but they take on different forms, and they've changed their ideas throughout time. They used to be the elves and gnomes when people used to believe in elves and gnomes. It's just kind of the same story, just subtly changing. That's what I see.
Ark, I think it's interesting. I think one thing you said kind of resonated simply with me is that Luciferians, essentially the Satanists, they don't really worship Satan, right? It's this turn it inward, which is essentially the antithesis of the gospel, right? Because we are told to die to ourselves, basically to resist our flesh, and that our heart is the wellspring of all evil. And that's what the gospel says, that we're supposed to be transformed by Christ. And it's interesting. I just haven't thought about this in the simplicity of this. The enemy, being not a creator, as you said, and being a counterfeiter, has just told you, no, look inside. The answer's inside of you. You can be a god. 666 is the number of man. Yeah. We are all gods. Like, the answers are inside of you, which really is the antithesis of the gospel.
It's a half truth.
Well, it's the antithesis of
it appeals to the truth inside of us.
Yeah, but it's the antithesis of the gospel, right? If we are inherently fallen and evil, and we are not, the only things we do good are through Christ, as Paul would say. I do nothing apart from Christ, right? Mm-hmm. Then the antithesis is it's self-worship. It's like, love yourself. It's all these messages we hear subtly throughout this thing are really just saying that the answer is inside of you, and we know the heart is the wellspring of all evil. And I think that's interesting, because it's the idea, it's the flesh versus spirit, right? And the enemy, instead of saying like you're going to worship Satan, which I think in a lot of places at the extremes that does happen, but really like the gateway is like, oh, the answer's inside of you. It's this Eastern this yoga, all this stuff that says that you can find that inside of you. And
Kundalini.
yeah, it's fascinating. I hadn't. It's very simple, but also like I think as Nate and I have gone through this journey, you realize, and we've said this 100 times. I've probably said it 100 times, Nate. That there's no new lies. It's the same lie. It's just repackaged.
Nothing's new under the sun.
Right? Solomon said that. It's just the deceptions. They just change the packaging. It's the same lie. It's the same deception. Yep. It's just they just change the packaging.
Well, I was gonna say the weird thing about Christianity is that, I think of the story of Peter walking on water, right? Like he has this moment where he steps out on the boat and he starts walking, but the moment he takes his eyes off of Christ, he sinks, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So we can do things, but it only comes through the power of Christ. We can't, when we start to think about ourselves and, I could become my own Christ. And I do see this new age thing creeping up. I see a lot of people sending us stuff and it smells like that. I'm like, I don't know. It smells fishy. It's
not only smells like that, it's the foundation of all they believe. It's the root of everything they know. And if you dig into this thing and the DMT and what these entities will tell you and what the teachers and shamans will tell you, they'll say, resist nothing. Whatever you do not resist these entities, no matter how scary it gets, no matter how much you feel like you're going to die. Embrace that death. Jump into the abyss. Let the serpent swallow you. They'll tell people these things, that you must embrace darkness. You must embrace this evil in order to get to the light. And what they're really doing is allowing, I believe, a demon. They're opening a doorway to a demonic presence who has the ability to, remember, these were once fallen angels. They have the ability to create ideas like artificial healing, the idea of healing someone or making you see the future, telling someone, about their long lost grandma. These are the familiar spirits of old. They're called familiar spirits because they're familiar not only to you, but your entire lineage of old. They can tell you where your grandma, hid her will or whatever, and come out with real convincing things. They can convince people they have past lives. But what's fascinating is, 9 times out of 10, when one of these people goes back and observes their past lives, they're like a pharaoh or a king of Egypt or king or queen of Egypt, Cleopatra, Alexander the Great. They're always these huge, ego-driven people. And this is what you find with the DMT. The DMT realm tells you the same thing. Mother Ayahuasca tells you, let the serpent swallow you, embrace the darkness. And then once you get over that point, then you'll see the light. And I think this is, like you said, it's the antithesis of the gospel message. We're supposed to die to ourselves. We're supposed to be servants of God, and we're supposed to embrace the Holy Spirit to come within us. We know this inherently through our creator God that put this within our souls to know these things. And so that's why these things are familiar and tempting to people within the new age who say, wow, this is right. Yeah, this sounds so right. It sounds so good, because it's kind of a half truth in a way, but it's a complete twist on the opposite to embracing yourself and giving all glory to yourself instead of giving glory to God.
So that's kind of a good transition into what is coming, some coming deceptions, because it seems like we are building up to something. We're in a pressure cooker right now in society. What about this? And I've always sort of resisted end times theology. I have to be honest that not until recently, the last couple of years, when I start realizing there's a war, it's been going on, it's been raging, that I kind of went back and gave some of that prophecy stuff a second look. But I was skeptical for a while, just because I didn't see it. I didn't see this part of the Bible. And once you see it, you're like, man, you got to get in there and get in the fight, because this is real. What's coming in your mind? How do you think it's happening? Because a lot of people send us things, and to be honest, it gets a little, you read some of it and it just sounds hopeless. And it's like, where's the hope in all of this? Like, how are we all going to be deceived? It just sounds like sometimes everyone's got theories, everyone has ideas, it gets wild. But I think what you've been saying this whole time is that the main deception is they're going to be offered to become godlike. That seems to be what is going to be presented to humans.
It's the original. There's the original thing presented, right? It's the back to the beginning.
Original sin presented all throughout time and being the end game deception.
But we won't know it. It will be repackaged probably in a different way, right? Like subtle.
I think so. Yeah, I think it could combine the alien deception in some way. I believe it could be as simple as this. It could be as simple as through something like CERN or the Large Hadron Collider, or through quantum computing technology, that they somehow tap into this realm, this other dimension, where they can actually access these entities who will present themselves, I believe, as the enlightened masters. They could present themselves as enlightened masters, or the aliens who created us, right, millions of years ago, planted our seed, like panspermia, like so many people believe. Show themselves in any way, shape, or form. They could just basically create a device, this big black box. Imagine a Ouija board in disguise, basically, that is disguised as a quantum computer technology that's telling us, oh, this is really high tech stuff that's tapping into other dimensions. You don't know how it works. We don't even know how it works, but it's technology. Trust us. And we've tapped into this other dimension. We're talking to these beings that are way smarter than us. They're going to save us from every problem that we have here on earth, and we're all going to become divine as well. They're going to teach us how to do that. But the first thing we got to do, they're telling us, is to remove this old dogma. These old Christians, we got to do away with them first of all, and there's many people within the New Age who have laid this foundation to get rid of Christians, or even explain away a kind of rapture type event. The idea that the old age has to be done away with, and the new age has to be born into the future. They got to somehow get rid of us. So in their mind, I think it's not that I believe in a pre-trib. I'm like a wait and see tribber. I was raised as a pre-tribber. Now I kind of lean post-trib, but I'm more like wait and see trib, because I think it could be anything. I think it's a mystery for a reason. I think if there wasn't a rapture type event, that they would be able to convince those left behind that we were the chosen ones.
Yeah.
These people that were taken away are the people that believe in this old dogma, and our alien brothers had to take them to another planet until they were evolved enough to move past that old belief, and they'll deal with them accordingly. But we who are left behind, we are the chosen ones, and that's how they would repackage that.
First, they got to get rid of all the old Kirk Cameron films of Left Behind, so no one has the key. And because they find that, right? You put that VHS in there, and you realize this is what's going on here. Everybody got raptured. Thank you, Kirk Cameron.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the best explanation I've heard about all that is that, like, the Israelites endured some of the plagues of Egypt, right? So it would make sense that we'd probably endure some of it. But I don't think we're going to go through all of it.
Well, wasn't Revelation talk about like the 5 virgins that get to go in, and then there's the 5 that don't, that have to stay out? And so I think that is sort of it prophetically. I mean, you can interpret how you want. That maybe it's middle trib. Maybe everybody was wrong. Maybe it's the middle. Maybe, and like Nate's saying, you have the first. You got to deal with the beginnings of it, and then God comes and gets you. But I do think you're right. I do think there is this. They have to lay groundwork for this deception as well, with what could be the rapture and all tied into the end. Because
and not even that they know. That's why I think they create multiple deceptions.
And I think it all. Yeah. I think it really
plays blind sometimes.
Yeah, and transhumanism has to play into this, right? Like that's part of the divine. It's the idea that that they're going to give us the technology to plug ourselves in, and it's the
no doubt.
It's the we're gonna elevate you to the next level, and this is how we're gonna do it.
The hive mind. You're going to plug into a hive mind. We're going to allow you to live forever. I mean, it goes back again to the garden. We want you to live forever, trapped in your sin. And there's a lot of New Agers that teach that, we're in heaven right now. They just got to create your own reality. And, through the secret, in the law of attraction, you can create heaven here on earth. The 1111 group, or the people into 2012, there's lots of groups that get together literally at ley lines all over the world at certain times throughout the year, and do ritual movements that are all at the exact same time, because they think if we can all just think the same or move in the same way or just become as one. You know, you hear that a lot. One world, one people. This all goes back to the one world agenda in the end times. I think, you know, it plays on our emotions. Like, yeah, we're all one race, one people. What's wrong with that? You know,
you're right. I mean, I was just thinking about John Lennon's "Imagine" song the other day of how that seed's been planted in us long ago with some of these guys. Like, imagine all the world, no wars. You know, everything's going to be great. So I think there's a pressure cooker, and they're creating this huge problem, and then there's going to be this solution that sweeps in. It just seems that way. It just seems that this spiritual, oh, we're going to bring all this healing. We have all this disease, and we're all dying. What? We got all the. You can upgrade to human 2.0, and you will not get coronavirus. You know what I mean?
It's like it's Babel 2.0 too, right? It's the bringing of all the nations together underneath the second coming of Nimrod, or what would be the Antichrist, the antithesis, the antithesis of the Messiah. And then you have these people with essentially that are getting together to war with God, right? They're building a ziggurat, or they're building a Stargate, or whatever you think that Tower of Babel was. It's again, nothing is new. It's just going to look a little different. But it's the same idea. It's the whole idea that there's going to be a one world government and a one world currency, and all the nations are together, and they're all going to be led by this man who became a mighty man, right? He became the Nephilim. Yep. And I think we're going to see it all over again. And again, I think I beat this dead horse, but Christians are going to be deceived because they don't know what's in their Bibles. And the most important thing I think we can do, and this goes back to what Nate was talking about at the top of the hour, and I believe at least, is that the hope is that we know how it's written and we know how it ends, right? And the hope is in Christ. And while there may be a lot of things for us to weather and storms for us to weather and go through, and this is going to get, it's going to get way worse before it gets better. We know what happens. We know who wins, right?
Well, some of it's just hard, Luke, because some of these guys think it's going to be so deceptive that you're going to sign on the dotted line. You're not even going to know, even if you're a Christian. And so part of me just goes like, when do you think you convert yourself over, Ark? When do you think you cross the Rubicon? When do you think you've gone too far? Because some people say, just this new financial system that they're going to present to you is enough. If you take their money, you're done. You're out. And I'm like, well, I mean, don't we use like the beast's money currently? Yeah. Where do you draw the line? How do you? It seems like a genetic thing in my mind. It seems like there's some genetic thing that's got to change.
Yeah, I think that's what they're going to do. I think the discovery of DNA, and then of course things like CRISPR and changing the DNA sequence. I think if this starts happening, and children are being raised that are super children, basically, you'll be looked at, if you don't change your child, as a bad person. You're a child neglector. You don't want your child to be a super person. You don't want them to live forever. How dare you? We're going to take your children away from you, you crazy Christian, you anti-vaccine type person. We're setting the stage now for who are, the Hegelian dialectic, us against them. And they already have the predetermined solution that they want to feed us, And it's basically, I got a song that came out called Order Out of Chaos. And that's basically what they're trying to do, present this chaos so then they can bring the order to us and set the record straight and bring peace to the world or whatever. But I think this is going to be a false peace. This is going to be a huge deception. And they're probably already, if they are tapping into these dimensions, working with these entities already. And we know that they work with these entities already just through channeling. And so that's why I don't think it will ever even be technology that'll do this. It'll be technology in a disguise. And that, like I said, a Ouija board in disguise. Yeah, I got this big black cube that looks like a fancy quantum computer, but really it's not even plugged in. It's just a Ouija board that you put your fingers on and starts speaking through these other realms, through these entities. Who knows? It wouldn't have to be that fancy for people to believe it. All it would have to do is bring the end result. And people, I think, will become desperate enough that they'll grasp onto that. And if it's able to cross the lines and bring sort of the false unification of religion, like, we see within the Catholic Church, them already trying to do with the Pope, trying to unify religions, bring about a one world type of belief system, then yeah, it's the people that are mainstream Catholics and talk the talk Christians, I think are going to be deceived in mass. And I think it's going to be the people that are on the fringe, the people on the outside that are, considered the crazies, who are actually going to really, be the ones that pass on these truths. And I've got a lot of songs that talk about all these exact type of subjects. Yeah. So it's really interesting because it all kind of connects back. And, I think it's going to be a deception, like the Bible says. It's if the elect could even be deceived, if the days weren't cut short. And so that tells me it's going to be very, very convincing, which is, it's a dire warning, but it's also a good thing. You want to tell somebody this. You want to tell someone, hey, it's going to get bad. That way you're not just, sitting on your hands and just keeping your head in the sand and not knowing about these deeper things because it's too scary or too much for you. We've got to be able to face these things head on. And, this is the reality we're given. This life is a blink of an eye compared to eternity. So even if we got to be taken out, I want to be the head of the spear, man. Put me at the head of the spear. I want to take these things on, like David against Goliath. I mean, these are the things that I feel like we're called to do. If you're into this kind of stuff, it's like you've got to be willing to not just talk the talk but walk the walk.
I mean, I think as this show's barreled on, Luke, I've felt we've crossed some of these creeks where I'm just like, man, I'm not going to be the same after this episode. That I just heard some things that are just harder to hear than some of the hardest stuff I've ever had to hear in my life. And on this show, I think we're going after the truth. And once you realize, Ark, that, when you keep going, eventually you're starting to become a threat. And then it gets heavy. And then you might have a spear thrown at you because...
you will.
Yeah, I think what I'm hearing is it reminds me of John the Baptist, right? These wild men on the fringes coming out of the desert, and they're crying out in the desert and leading, bringing that truth, preparing the way. And this time is for the second coming of the Messiah, right? It's the, and that's what I'm hearing, right? And we know how John the Baptist ended. I mean, it ended with his head on a platter. And that's not the ending we hope for ourselves at all. But I think that the idea, just that metaphor in there, that there is going to be the fringes that are going to be these guys, eating locusts and wearing their own camel skins, and that in metaphor, but that are the forerunners that are proclaiming the truth and saying this is the deception, but here's the truth: is that Jesus is returning and he's coming, and don't be deceived, he's coming, right? And I do think that in a weird kind of metaphor way that some of the truth is going to come like that at some point, right? When we all become outsiders. In some ways, we are.
Yeah.
Just a kind of that's a light that went on. It's like I was thinking of John the Baptist.
Yeah, we got to keep focused on the eternal and be willing to pay the price. I mean, just like all the apostles did. That doesn't mean that we are going to have to suffer some horrible death, but we should be willing to for Christ. He died for us. And that may be, and there's a lot of people throughout time are believers, and people have been persecuted throughout time, and we will face persecution. I think the big thing is defining persecution from God's wrath. We will not face God's wrath, but we will and do face persecution. Yeah. We always have. And so that's not going to change. I mean, no matter what, even though we have it probably the best place on earth here in America still, but you look over the globe in places like China and other areas, people are being killed for their faith in Jesus.
100%.
Probably every day. Yeah. So this isn't anything.
We had a woman named Christine Kane who came and spoke at our church, and she told the story. This reminded me of what you were saying about how she went over to speak. The pastors in China, the underground church, had her come over and speak to them, and they said, we don't know how to lead. Like, all we really are able to do is teach our disciples and our congregation how to how to witness to their prison guards as they're led to their execution. This is what they said. And so then I think it's sobering to remember that there are still on this planet right now, there are Christians that are going to their death for their faith. And these pastors are saying the best we know how to do is, and it reminds me of Paul. Like, Paul, we talked to Nate about this week. Nate and I had a talking the other night about, what if they lock us all up? Well, maybe just like Paul, we need to preach to our prison guards, right? And I don't know that's going to be that extreme. I know but at some point it's coming. It's coming. Like, we're going to be persecuted. It doesn't,
and God will be with us each step of the way. It reminds me of Kent Hovind, who was put in prison for 7 years and being one of the biggest creation evangelists out there and changing millions of people's hearts and minds toward the truth. And I believe this was the sole purpose. He was put in prison because they ended up finding his case was just a bunch of nonsense. But during that time that he was in prison, he led hundreds of people to Christ. So, whatever point that we're put in, God's going to be with us, and we've just got to be willing to take that step and know that this, like I said, destiny is a way to put it. Hey, we live in each moment day by day, and know that Christ is with us eternally. And whether this be the day that we die or we live to be 120, it's a blink of an eye compared to eternity. So when you live for the eternal, when your reward is waiting in heaven in full, it's I think it becomes a little easier to handle.
Well, I have a few thoughts on this episode. Is that there's a deception for everybody. There is a deception for all groups. Everyone who thinks they've got the truth, they got the truth cornered. We're good over here, like we're the woke crowd, and we understand, what's good for humanity. There's a deception for you, and there's a deception for the other side too, right? Like, put your faith in this one guy that's going to be president, and he's going to change everything. And it's like we're all kind of being deceived, right? Because we're all kind of looking for these events, and I just think that, like, the other day I was talking to a couple friends just about like flat earth stuff. I'm like, I wouldn't be surprised if, if an angel came out of the wall and said the earth is flat and then left, and be like, yeah, probably, because I believe so many lies, I don't know anymore,
Yeah.
But, I
think that's part of the deception, is muddying the waters.
Yeah.
It's Leviathan, right? It's the chaos. It's the chaos. Satan is the Lord of chaos, and the Lord of the underworld, and the Lord of chaos. That's what the Bible's very explicit about that. So continue, Nate. I'm sorry. I just want to point that out.
Well, I'm just in this state of like, it's like Jesus is forcing me for the first time. I mean, I've known the stories, and I as a young kid, I accepted Christ, but it's not till now I'm 40 years old where I'm like, it's like water in the desert. Like, I have to go and like, I don't know what's true anymore. Jesus, tell me what's true, because it's insane out there. And I don't even, this guy is supposedly a good guy. It turns out they turn up something and you're like, wow, I thought that guy was saying some good stuff. And it turns out maybe it was all a deception, all of a lie. And Jesus even says that, many will come in my name. And so as Christians, and that was something I want to talk about is, before we go, is that, do you think a lot of people are worshiping the Jesus, but it's actually the Antichrist right now, currently, thinking that they're worshiping in some of these big systems, like especially in parts of the Catholic Church, where it's like, this is just a massive, huge structure. Like, I mean, when they're saying their prayers and they're going through their motions, you're just like,
there's a lot of people deceived. I mean, there's a lot of people that just, like you said, going through the motions, and that are just completely blind to the true gospel message, and they could go to church for 30 years and just still not get it if they're not living it, and it's not just a social club. And I think that's how a lot of people, unfortunately, in families have looked at it in many ways. And you've got to actually apply it to your everyday life. You got to live it. You've got to, teach it to your kids. And I mean, unless you're living it, unless your kids are seeing it, they're not going to believe it, So I think that's fundamental to walk the walk and apply it to your everyday life. And when you're going through troubles, approach it from a biblical perspective. Go to God first, be in prayer, read a chapter a day, all these things apply, and feed feed that spirit. And also, when we're willing to dig into these things and you walk, know that you're covered by, put on the full armor of God, basically, before you go into this stuff. I don't think digging into a lot of this stuff is for everybody. And I don't think everybody should necessarily dig into the stuff, because without a proper foundation, you can be very lost. And nowadays, especially, these subjects have become so muddled. Things like the Nephilim, for instance, if you go back 10 years ago, when people were 10, 15 years ago, people were very rarely making YouTube videos about the Nephilim. A few people were, and most of them were pretty biblically sound, because these people were studying it from a biblical perspective. Nowadays, man, almost, I'd say 3/4 of the videos are disinformation about, giant bones and mud fossils and, 1,000-foot giants, all the stuff that's like, to me, like, it's just a bunch of fairy tales. And we've got to keep it reasonable within a line of truth. Otherwise, we're just deceiving people. People, imagine somebody who's brand new and they hear about the Nephilim. I'm going to investigate this Nephilim. They go on and they just start seeing all this nonsense. They're just immediately turned off, like, oh, these people must believe in nonsense, And unfortunately, I think this is, there's a lot of this out there, and I have lots of friends that are flat earthers, lots of friends that are into this kind of stuff. But I think a lot of these things are taking our eyes and focus off some of the true things that we can and need to focus on. And it's unfortunate, especially in these critical times.
Yeah, and I don't mean to take a shot at people who believe in flat Earth. I personally,
half the people are friends with.
Yeah.
I could be wrong.
I could be wrong, but I definitely just feel like it doesn't matter to me. Like, I think there are bigger fish to fry. There's more important things going on. Hollow Earth is interesting to me, though. I believe
the Earth is hollow.
Oh, you do?
I have a song called Hollow Earth. Yes.
Okay, so, and I
do believe the Earth is hollow, and I do believe we could be in a geocentric type of atmosphere or world or universe.
Interesting. But yeah, a lot of people have been sending us more Hollow Earth stuff. And to make a connection between the two things, let's say Satan, we get close to the truth. Satan's going to give you a little twist of something, get you off that rabbit hole. You're getting closer to the truth, and then you go down this other rabbit hole, and you think that's the truth, right? And it seems like with all these topics, you were just talking about the Nephilim, and then it turns into ancient aliens, and you're like, no, right? And then it's flat Earth, and then you're like, well, maybe there's something true there. Maybe there's something about our Earth that Satan has kept hidden from us. We don't know what it is. Maybe there is a truth there, and why does it matter in this war that we're in? Mm-hmm. Well, what does Hollow Earth matter in terms of this war? You think? Why would that be an important thing?
I think that it matters because it's much more believable that if there are physical beings, for instance, going back to the physical idea that I don't lean toward, but if there are physical entities or physical beings or giants, I believe it's much more plausible that that's where they live, and that's where these crafts come from, is actually inside our Earth, under our oceans, not out in another planet or other universes. But if they are physical, I believe they're right here on Earth and always have been. And basically inside the Hollow Earth, Sheol, the Bible talks about the fallen angels that are chained into the abyss for their certain time, and that they will be basically released upon the world in God's timing. So these are things that basically tell me that this sounds like a real place, and it always is saying it's below Earth.
Well, Paul says that,
and so
he says powers above and below.
Above and below. Yeah. I mean, it makes sense. You look at the size, if the Earth is a globe, going from the globe model, I mean, the crust of the Earth is not even the thickness of the skin of an orange. And so think how much we're missing of our Earth.
Yeah.
The most of our Earth we've never seen. 99.9% of it we've never seen underneath it, inside of it. And so you think about how big that cavity could be. it's not just a cavity the size of a cave, for instance. I would imagine something 10,000 miles across that was so big that it actually created its own environment, so to speak, that you could have, something thousands of miles away with giving light from, the core of the earth or something. I don't know how that would all work, but
something's there.
when you imagine things in a much bigger space, it changes things. And I think that, to me, that is what people are missing. People that believe in the flat earth, I think, just aren't picturing it big enough. I just think they're picturing it much smaller than it is. I think if you picture it 1,000,000,000 billion times bigger than what you think it is, then would it seem flat? Or then would, it would seem flat, but it would actually still be round. I've got a lot of ideas on that. It's a whole other podcast.
Yeah, you got a sixth album in you for that one, right?
There you go.
Yeah. No, there's something there. I feel like wherever there's smoke, there's fire, and then there's a lot of attention from a lot of people on that. So something's going on. I don't know exactly what it is. We're creatures focused, so we stay on the creature stuff, and we don't get too wild, right, Luke?
Not too much. But the Hollow Earth thing's interesting, like in the sense that, what was the guy that said that he saw the aliens fighting the army in the underground base? Yeah, and they started thinking, there's a lot of deep underground military bases, and so not to rabbit trail too hard, but there's a lot of stuff we don't know about that even that our government does. And I think it's interesting too that you spoke a little bit about these entities working with governments, and that's something that we hear. We hear it in terms of aliens. The aliens are here. We're working with them. Eisenhower met with them. We traded technology, and it's interesting that thread seems to keep being pulled. And whether you subscribe to being aliens or it's demonic entities, we may be talking about the same things. It just depends really where that conversation lands. And
yeah. Have you heard of the Collins Elite?
No.
So you guys, have you heard of the Fall brothers, Justin Fall and Wes Fall?
We've been emailing.
Okay, you guys should hook up. They're a lot like you guys, they and a lot like me and my brother. We should have a big convention or something. But they did a documentary called Higher Entities, and it goes deep into the Collins Elite, which is a group of supposed Christian researchers that were hired by the government that, in the end, determined that this was a demonic infiltration of some sort. So you should watch that documentary, Higher Entities, by the Fall brothers. It's really good.
Yeah, I've been messaging with them, trying to connect on that, because a lot of people have been sending us stuff about Antarctica lately, and that seems like we follow kind of where the show goes. And a lot of people coming on the show talking about seeing giants today, and people say there's places where there's giants there in this remote part of Antarctica. I don't know. I
think it's cool to have all different perspectives on, man. I think it's awesome because, I listen to Joe Rogan. I listen to all the people, all kinds of different people, because you're going to draw in different perspectives you never heard before when you got people you disagree with. And that's great. I love it.
Yeah. And we try to filter it all through the Bible to give people some sort of foundation. I mean, not just some sort of foundation to what we think is the truth to explain it all.
Yeah, you're witnessing.
Yeah,
totally.
Well, I mean, I think this.
Yeah, I was on.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just.
Go
ahead.
This is a great dance you guys are playing here.
No, you go.
I forgot what I was going to say, so now you have to.
This is a great moment, guys.
Oh no, I was on. I was talking about, Joe Jordan. Have you heard of his research at the CE4 research group? That's another guy you should have on.
Yeah.
But I just did a podcast with him on Sam Tripoli's Tinfoil Hat podcast.
Yeah.
And they are far from believers, which was a very interesting talk. And it ended up having more people making comments on that episode than any in past history, because I think we pushed a lot of buttons there.
Yeah.
It was interesting.
Yeah. And we get a lot of emails, and the bigger our show grows, the more 1 stars, because people can't handle the biblical narrative. I mean, they've been, and I understand those people because they've been through some church trauma. They've had, a youth pastor do something lame to them or actual abuse. So they write it all off. And the problem is you just because you have some sort of PTSD doesn't mean you get to rewrite truth, and you have to deal with your trauma, and then you have to come back to the story and look at it from a different lens. And it doesn't. People do that though, and that's what we have in this culture. So it's a bummer, but
I mean, I think a lot of different people out there are searching for the same thing. They're recognizing that we live in a world that, like, you know, like sin is a foreign thing. Sin and death are foreign. They shouldn't be here, you know, and we recognize this, but we go about changing this or trying to fix it in all these different ways. And if we can relate to people just at the recognition of what these things are, hey, why is it that all of us are bad? Why is it that all of us fall short? None of us can do what we know is right? We all set out at the beginning of the day to, it's going to be a great day. And then we get mad at somebody that cuts in front of us and we're all mad and everything goes, the other direction. So it's like, but that's all of us. It's a story of all of us that we recognize something within us that's not right. Yeah. And the New Age is trying to go about it one way. And all these people are trying to go about it from different directions. But, when they hear the gospel message presented in the right way and it's the right timing for someone that's there at the right moment, that's when it works. And that's what I think God does. God will send people to your guys' show to hear those messages and hear the things they need to hear. And sometimes it's just a matter of planting a seed, a matter of just dropping that one nugget of truth that gets people to realize, it finally clicks for them and makes sense, that's what I want to be, is just a link in the chain for anybody who's out there in search of truth, basically. And we should all be in search of truth, right? If there is a truth. I often ask people that, do you believe in absolute truth? And many people will say, no, there's no absolute truth. And I say, how sure are you of that? Are you absolutely sure? So, that's the thing, is like, there is one truth, right? And that truth should be exclusive by its purest definition. There couldn't, we believe the earth was created in 6 days. Hindus believe it was created on the back of a turtle. Evolutionists believe it was over billions of years. All three of these things can't be right. We could all be wrong, but one of them could be. There's only one way it happened, right? Yeah. So that should be the thing that we all are in search of, that one truth of our reality. And to me, the Bible, the Christian message, the gospel, recognizing, the garden, the original sin, all these things are pieces of the puzzle. And the Bible is the glue that brings all these pieces of the puzzle together to form a clear picture where we can actually recognize what's going on. We don't see it fully, but we recognize. We don't know the exact time, but we know the season. We can recognize the season. And that's what you're talking about, where we feel like something's coming. And I've got a song called Know the Signs that talks about that, that all these groups out there are recognizing, they feel something in the air that's changing, but we're not sure what, but we're all in anticipation for it, So, I think we live in actually amazing times, that we were chosen to live in this time in era of reality. If you think about it, if you go all back through reality and all the history of the Bible and the, and stories of the Bible, the fact that we're living as these things are unfolding, I mean, it's incredible in my opinion. I mean, it's just, and to me, it's God's grace in a way to make these things so more well known, to basically externalize these things in a way, like all the secrets, the occult things, all that kind of stuff. It's all been externalized. It's all out in the open now. And I think it's God's grace in a way to say, hey, all you people that were on the fence, get off the fence, because you see it now. It's so obvious that you should be able to jump into this and really figure things out, if or at least realize that, hey, the Bible was true. These things are unfolding toward this one world thing.
Well, it feels like, just to kind of give you some thoughts here to wrap it up. It's like the Bible doesn't hold your hand. It goes 100 miles an hour from the beginning. And for whatever reason, we've had several people tell us, like, man, you guys talk about the Bible, but it never feels like preaching. And I'm fascinated. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, I don't know why churches got into this like preaching mode where we preach at you. But when you just tell the story as it is, going 100 miles an hour, it's fascinating, and you can't help but want to be a part of it. So, and that's the beauty maybe of a podcast. We're not preaching at people. We're just talking about the weird parts of the story. And people latch on to that because it's like, man, that sounds like the truth. And I mean, I know for one, like I got preached at 6 days a week, so I know what that feels like, right? And so it's good to bring you on the show. Thank you for coming on and talking about these truths. And hopefully people out there listening don't feel preached at, because it's a heavy truth, it's a heavy story, and it's just, you have to be able to hear the parts that you might not want to hear to make sense of aliens, Nephilim, giants, Bigfoot, all these creatures, all these weird stories. There's a way to make sense of it all. And I think you did good at putting that all together for us. Appreciate that.
Oh, thanks, man. And I know that not everybody's into hip hop and all that kind of stuff, but if you're just into reading lyrics, we also have all our lyrics on our website. If people check that out at destinylab.com as well, because I know a lot of people, rap music, I don't want to hear this, but dig into the lyrics, watch some videos. If you go to our YouTube, we've got dozens of music videos that really because you see a visual and the audio at the same time. And it kind of gives a bigger perspective of the things that we're talking about. So like I said, my goal isn't to necessarily preach that people already know this stuff, but to be a link in the chain for people investigating these things, to get them to investigate the Word of God and eventually become a believer. So,
well, Ark, thank you. What's the website where they can find you?
DestinyLab.com is our website. And then if you go to youtube.com/DestinyLab, and then we also have a Patreon /DestinyLab if you want to check that out. And then I also wanted to offer, if anybody does order our music, we currently have 4 CDs available. But if you order all 4 albums, I'll throw in the 5th album for free, which is a download of 30 additional songs. It's 100 songs in all total if you get all 5 of our albums. And they're all about the things you guys talk about. And just say you heard us on Blurry Creatures, and we'll hook you up.
Let's
with the deal.
go.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. You have to put on your Jinkos, though. You know what I mean? Go back. Or is that 90s?
No, I wore jean coats. Totally. I had the one with the fur on top, dude.
I'm talking like the Jinko jeans, though. Was that 90s when they were like the big baggy jeans?
The what?
Jinko.
Jingo. I thought you said the jean coats.
Oh, not the jean coats.
I was part of that group.
Hey, I still have one with a sheep fur. I still wear that.
They've come back in, dude. They've come back in.
Sometimes you just got to hold on long enough and it never leaves.
No doubt.
I think that was the 90s. It went from hammer pants to like super baggy jeans. So that was more 90s. That's not our style.
But get out your Stussy shirt, Nate. Your No Fear shirt.
Yeah.
TNC Surf. Let's go.
Maui and Sons. Yeah, we have a little bit. We don't really have a
OP.
We don't really have a hip hop vibe on our show. We're more like synths and Stranger Things sounding. But for those,
me too. People are surprised they ever find out I make rap music because I'm not a big fan of rap music, to be honest. I like it, the old stuff, but the new stuff, not so much.
Yeah.
Well, Ark, it's been a pleasure, man. Thank you for your time. Thanks for coming on.
Anytime, guys.
Check out.
I love your guys' show and love what you guys do.
Thanks, man.
Oh, thanks, man.
So this is Ark. Check him out. Destiny Lab is the project. DestinyLab.com.
And what's your podcast again?
Digging for the Truth with Ark and Neo.
All right.
And that's also available on iTunes, or if you go to my YouTube, I've got a bunch of extra episodes on YouTube too.
I love it. Well, Luke, we got to come up with our names, Luke.
Yeah.
I had to do a stage name, man. I knew this stuff was too controversial. I don't want to be like,
I know we're in trouble now.
I'm missing.
Dude, they're gonna find us, Nate.
Yeah, I love the little people, so it'll be somewhere in there, right, Luke?
It'll be just the little people will come for you, so you might be able to handle it.
Oh, wow.
Elves.
All right, man.
All right, thanks, Ark.
All right, guys.
Yep.
Thanks, buddy.
Again, God bless.
Yeah.
See you.
Amen.
See you, buddy.
All right.
All right. Well, Luke,
Nate, it's
been
funny.
a long day.
Yeah, one of the things I was going to say is that he said something that we talked about today, is that remember that there's no mistake that we are here for the time we are here. So while a lot of this stuff is deep and a lot of it's dark and it can give you anxiety, remember that God puts you in this time knowing that you were an integral part of his plan and you were able to shoulder all the stuff that's coming, and you've shouldered all the stuff that's already come. And so there's a hope in that. There's hope that you are exactly where you're supposed to be on this dot on a line of an eternity. And I think there's hope in that, Nate. With all the nasty stuff and all the things that we uncover on the dark side, that we know we're supposed to be exactly where we are in this point of time. So,
well, it's funny because I was like walking through my backyard feeling some of this stuff, and I just started thinking to myself, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. And I think we're getting there again. We think about we've read these Bible verses where these guys walked in the shadow of death. And we grew up with like, oh, that was crazy. David's a crazy guy.
I mean, Coolio rapped it, dude.
Coolio rapped it.
Yeah, man.
But it was just a thing. You know what I mean? We've had this detached understanding of Christianity our whole lives. We never had to put on the armor of God because we never really had any problems in terms of like spiritual problems, other than like, oh, I can't pay my bills, or I can't, get into college, or, that was the extent of our worries, right? And now we have like the whole world is being split into two camps, We have actual people ready to like line you up and throw you off the boat if you don't do what they say.
Yeah, it's happening. It's already happening.
Yeah.
China. I mean, this is not a new thing either. I think that's the other perspective, right? Is that the world's been through this. Depending on what you believe on the timeline for Earth, and then you brought up end time stuff. We're gonna be good, brother. We're gonna make it.
Yeah, we're gonna need each other. We're gonna need you guys out there. We're building a great community. Lots of good discussion on our Facebook group for members, and I appreciate the members, the people who sponsor the show, help Luke and I find more time to do this. Good discussion there. Lots of encouraging things, and you guys are messaging us, kind of taking us under your wing. Like whatever we're doing, you enjoy it, and I just want to say thank you, because you guys have been sending us a lot of just encouraging things.
Giving Nate that juice.
Giving me the juice, man. That's the downside of the juice, is when you don't have the juice.
Just got to get more.
When you got the juice, you can do anything you want. You can make 1,000 memes and make the world laugh. But when you're out of juice, you're just in the corner. Everyone's like, Nate's out of juice. What happened?
Just fill up his juice box.
No, but everyone's great. We have a great community here. Blurry Creatures, we're coming on a year episode, a year, Luke. 1 year.
1 year, Nathan.
This Saturday.
Mm-hmm.
This episode's going to come out right after that.
It's amazing. It only took 1 year for us to figure everything out. We got it all figured out now.
Dude, I'm so confused. I don't know what. It's interesting to look back and think we had no idea what was gonna happen when we started this thing, right?
Right.
It's been fascinating. So if you want to be a part of what we're doing and support us, help us, encourage us, blurrycreatures.com/members. Become a member. Go to the chat. Hear some exclusive episodes. Hear everything early and unreleased material and all the good stuff. Appreciate you guys out there listening. It's been a long year and a good year and a crazy year in the world, and it's good to know that we're all in this together. So with that,
it's that time, Nate. It's time to roll that time cop.
Roll that time cop.